Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, please note that this presentation is for educational purposes only and is not intended as specific medical advice. Always consult your institutional protocols and guidelines for patient care. Why is my patient's lactate high? A modern framework for clinicians. I'm glad you're joining me today. We are going to completely dismantle the old way you were taught to think about lactic acid and rebuild a modern, evidence-based framework that will change how you practice in the intensive care unit and the emergency department. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to define hyperlactatemia versus lactic acidosis using current thresholds, explain why most lactate elevation in critical illness is aerobic, not anaerobic, classify lactic acidosis into types A, B, and D with clinical examples, apply the Biphasic Kinetics framework to guide resuscitation, and recognize when chasing a lactate level may harm the patient. Let's start with definitions because words matter. We have two distinct thresholds. A lactate less than 2 millimoles per liter is normal. Greater than 2 is hyperlactatemia. This is a warning sign that requires serial monitoring. But greater than 4 millimoles per liter is lactic acidosis. This is strongly associated with mortality. It means you must escalate your evaluation and resuscitate if hypoperfusion is present. Notably, the Surviving Sepsis Campaign guidelines define sepsis-induced hypoperfusion as including a lactate above 2 millimoles per liter, which triggers the initial fluid resuscitation recommendation of at least 30 milliliters per kilogram of crystalloid. So even the 2 to 4 zone warrants close attention and action. Now, let's talk about the old model you were taught in medical school. The classic teaching was simple. Hypoxia leads to anaerobic metabolism, which produces lactic acid as a toxic waste product. Therefore, high lactate equals tissue ischemia, and the treatment is always to give more oxygen and more fluids. This model is elegant, it's easy to remember, and unfortunately, it is fundamentally incomplete and often wrong. If not hypoxia, then what? The evidence is clear. Oxygen is present, yet lactate rises. In septic shock, global tissue hypoxia is often absent despite elevated lactate. Skeletal muscle oxygen levels are actually increased, not decreased. And the heart functions at intracellular oxygen levels as low as single-digit millimeters of mercury, far lower than most clinicians assume. So hypoxia-driven lactate is not the rule. If the oxygen is there, why is the lactate rising? You need to always ask yourself this. The real story is aerobic lactate production. Lactate is produced under completely aerobic conditions every single day. Your body produces roughly 20 millimoles per kilogram per day. The pyruvate lactate equilibrium naturally favors lactate formation. Multiple clinical states amplify this aerobic production. The unifying mechanism in many critical illnesses is actually pyruvate dehydrogenase, or PDH dysfunction. Think of pyruvate dehydrogenase as a bottleneck. Glucose breaks down into pyruvate. Normally, pyruvate enters the mitochondria through the PDH gate to fuel the Krebs cycle. But in critical illness, inflammation, or toxin exposure, that PDH gate gets blocked. Pyruvate backs up, and the only place it can go is to convert into lactate. This happens even when there is plenty of oxygen sitting right there in the cell. We classify lactic acidosis into type A and type B. Type A is true tissue hypoperfusion. Early septic shock with microcirculatory failure. Cardiogenic shock with reduced cardiac output. Hemorrhagic shock with reduced oxygen delivery. Cardiac arrest with global hypoperfusion. Mesenteric ischemia with regional hypoperfusion. And severe anemia with reduced oxygen-carrying capacity. In all of these, restoring perfusion and oxygen delivery is the correct answer. But then we have type B, where there is no overt hypoperfusion. Type B1 is driven by underlying systemic disease. Sepsis, even without shock, causes PDH inhibition by cytokines. Liver failure impairs lactate clearance. Malignancy, especially hematologic cancers, drives the Warburg effect. Severe asthma causes a massive beta-agonist effect plus the extreme work of breathing. Seizures cause intense muscle activity and a catecholamine surge. Thiamine deficiency means the PDH cofactor is missing, and diabetic ketoacidosis is an independent contributor. Quick number to anchor this. Cox and colleagues in 2012 found that 68% of DKA patients had a lactate above 2.5 millimoles per liter, and 40% had a lactate above 4 millimoles per liter on presentation. The mechanism is multifactorial: catecholamine surge, mild dehydration, and sometimes delactate. So when you see an elevated lactate in a DKA patient, it doesn't necessarily mean sepsis, it can be the DKA itself. Type B2 is driven by drugs and toxins, and these are commonly missed. Epinephrine drives beta-2 aerobic glycolysis. Quick pearl on epinephrine. Day and colleagues showed back in 1996 that epinephrine produces a clean dose-dependent rise in lactate, often into the 3 to 6 millimoles per liter range, in patients with no evidence of tissue hypoxia at all. So if you see a lactate climbing on a patient who just started an AP drip, pause before you reach for more fluid. The drug itself is doing this. Propylene glycol, the diluent in intravenous lorazepam and diazepam, can accumulate. Linezolid causes mitochondrial toxicity. Metformin causes mitochondrial complex 1 inhibition. One nuance worth knowing on metformin: the literature splits this into two entities. MILA, metformin-induced lactic acidosis, is the rare pure overdose. A young patient who took a bottle lactate of 20 otherwise healthy organs. MALA, metformin-associated lactic acidosis, is the much more common clinical entity. A chronic metformin user who developed acute kidney injury or sepsis, and now their normal therapeutic dose has accumulated. MILA you treat with dialysis. MALA you treat the second hit, like the AKI or sepsis. Other type B2 culprits include albuterol, propofol, nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors, cyanide, which blocks complex 4 of the electron transport chain, salicylates, which uncouple oxidative phosphorylation, and toxic alcohols through multiple mechanisms. Type B3 refers to inborn errors of metabolism. These are rare, typically presenting in the pediatric population. They include mitochondrial myopathies, glycogen storage diseases, and pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiency. While rare in adult critical care, they are important to keep in the back of your mind for the undifferentiated young patient. Now let's talk about type D, D-lactic acidosis. This is the one your standard lab test will not detect. Standard assays only measure L-lactate. D-lactate requires a specific send-out assay. You should suspect this in 3 specific clinical settings: short bowel syndrome or gastric bypass, where unabsorbed carbohydrates reach the colon; propylene glycol toxicity, as it metabolizes to both D and L-lactate; and diabetic ketoacidosis, where methylglyoxal metabolism produces D-lactate. And remember those DKA patients we just discussed. In 2011, researchers specifically measured D-lactate in DKA and found it was significantly elevated through methylglyoxal metabolism, contributing to the anion gap. So a DKA patient with persistent acidosis and a normal standard lactate may still have a D-lactate problem. The clinical picture of D-lactic acidosis is unique. Patients present with unexplained high anion gap metabolic acidosis, but a normal standard lactate level. They often have neurologic symptoms: slurred speech, ataxia, confusion, or even coma. Though the exact neurologic mechanism is debated, the presentation is classic. Management involves stopping carbohydrate intake, giving oral antibiotics such as metronidazole, neomycin, vancomycin, or kanamycin to clear the D-lactate-producing bacteria, and correcting the acidemia with bicarbonate if severe. Let's zoom in to the cellular level: cytopathic hypoxia. In severe sepsis, even if you achieve perfect macrohemodynamics, perfect blood pressure, perfect cardiac output, the cells may still be starving. Mitochondrial dysfunction prevents normal oxidative phosphorylation. The cell cannot use the oxygen that is delivered. This is why pushing more oxygen or more fluid does not fix the lactate in this state. We also need to reframe lactate as a fuel. The lactate shuttle theory shows us that lactate is not just waste. The heart uses lactate for up to 60% of its oxidative metabolism during stress. The brain uses it for 25 to 30% of its energy. Lactate is a highly efficient, easily transportable energy source that your body relies on during critical illness. Beyond fuel, lactate is a signaling molecule. Through a process called histone lactylation, specifically H3K18 lactate actually enters the nucleus and alters gene expression. It shifts macrophages from a pro-inflammatory state to a reparative, healing state. This is an emerging area of research, but the implications are profound. Your body may be producing lactate on purpose to help you survive and recover. When treating septic shock, you must understand the biphasic kinetics of lactate clearance. There are two phases. The first 6 to 12 hours is the flow-dependent phase. Here, tissue hypoperfusion is the main driver, and your goal is to restore oxygen delivery. But after 12 hours, you enter the metabolic phase. Here, metabolic reprogramming and PDH dysfunction take over. The key takeaway is that persistent hyperlactatemia without signs of hypoperfusion can be misleading and should not drive further resuscitation. You must stop escalating fluids and simply assess perfusion. This brings us to the ANDROMEDA-SHOCK trial, which challenged the dogma of lactate-targeted resuscitation. They compared resuscitating based on capillary refill time versus resuscitating based on lactate levels. The results? The capillary refill group had less organ dysfunction and a trend toward lower mortality. A post-hoc analysis was even more striking. Patients who had a normal capillary refill time, but were still given fluids just to chase a high lactate, had significantly higher mortality, 40% versus 23%. Once perfusion normalizes, persistent lactate is not a reason to escalate. The ANDROMEDA-SHOCK 2 trial confirmed this. Personalized hemodynamic resuscitation targeting capillary refill time resulted in faster recovery of organ dysfunction and less fluid administration. The 28-day mortality was virtually identical between groups. The win ratio was driven by a shorter duration of vital support, not mortality. And here's something worth noting. Capillary refill time as a resuscitation target has been in the Surviving Sepsis Campaign guidelines since 2021. But the 2026 update retained and reinforced this recommendation. So this concept has now been endorsed across 2 guideline cycles. It's not new, and it's not going away. So what is our step-by-step clinical approach? Step 1. Is the patient in shock? Check blood pressure, capillary refill time, mottling, and urine output. Step 2. If yes, resuscitate to restore perfusion. Use fluids, vasopressors, and inotropes as needed. Step 3. Reassess perfusion. Is the capillary refill time normal? Is the central venous to arterial carbon dioxide gap normal? Step 4. If perfusion is normal but lactate remains high, stop escalating therapy. Look for type B causes. The 2026 Surviving Sepsis Campaign guidelines now state explicitly that fluid administration should be individualized after the initial bolus and monitoring of lactate decrement, not continued until lactate normalizes. That's a direct guideline endorsement of everything we just walked through. The era of chasing the number to 0 is over. Step 5. Treat the underlying cause. Lactate is a clue, not a diagnosis. Let's review our take-home points. 1. Hyperlactatemia is a warning. Lactic acidosis adds acidemia and reflects severity. It is not a hard threshold. 2. Most lactate elevation in critical illness is aerobic, not anaerobic. 3. Pyruvate dehydrogenase dysfunction is the unifying mechanism. 4. Type B drugs are commonly missed. Think epinephrine, propylene glycol, and metformin. 5. Type D requires a specific assay. 6. Remember the biphasic kinetics. Flow-dependent early, metabolic late. 7. Stop chasing lactate after capillary refill time normalizes. 8. Lactate is a fuel and a signaling molecule, not just a waste product. I strongly encourage you to review the Surviving Sepsis Campaign 2026 guidelines and the other references listed in the video description. The full guidelines were published in early 2026 in both critical care medicine and intensive care medicine. Both DOs are in the description. It is a comprehensive update and well worth a read in full. Thank you for your time and attention. Remember, treat the patient, assess the perfusion, and know when to stop chasing the number. Have a great shift.